Are we live? Well, I'm live here. Oh, good morning. We're just having a debate about whether the actual live stream's working, but thank you for telling me I'm still alive, Jess, so that's really good to hear. Warm welcome, everyone, to our annual parochial church meeting. Warm welcome to those who are joining us online. We're glad you're here. Unfortunately, in a sense, you're going to have a secondary experience because you can watch, but you can't participate. And there'll be certain times when I'll be referring to things happening in the body of the church, but you won't be able to see them. But we hope you still manage to pick up a sense of what's going on. Do put your comments in the live chat. We will read them afterwards. We can't really incorporate them into the meeting, but it's great that you're with us this evening. And do you realise this is probably the first proper APCM I've done here at All Saints. So the first year it was in the Clark Foley. Last year, 2 years, it was on Zoom. So this is the first time we've been in the building together. So you are part of a historic sort of event, the first APCM in this church building. So well done. Turn around to those next to you if you don't know who you are. Don't know who you are. If you don't know who they are, perhaps say good evening to them and perhaps introduce yourself. Fantastic. Now, hopefully, you've received all the paperwork. We deliberately haven't printed up lots of copies of it because we want to be environmentally aware, but there were copies sent out online, so either you have them in your screens or your tablets or whatever. If not, then obviously, hopefully, we can still refer to them. There are some paper copies of 2 reports that came out after the first lot was sent through, which is for Deanery Synod and Fabric Committee reports. But this is actually 2 meetings on the same evening. We have a meeting of parishioners, and then we have an annual meeting. So this first is the meeting of parishioners. And I'm going to do the welcome and the Bible reading and the prayer for both meetings at this time, because it's important that though this is an important meeting and it's part of the Anglican Church's rules and regulations, there's a legal status to all that we're doing today, ultimately this is part of our mission and ministry, that we want All Saints to be a place that blesses the community and reaches out with the good news of Jesus. And that means, as it says, church meetings are brilliant because they can be part of that mission and ministry. And hopefully, as we go through the various agendas, as we welcome people coming onto various posts, as we say goodbye to others who are stepping down in various responsibilities, we'll be able to see that in its context. But what's very important is we start by looking at a bit of the Bible. Now, the actual part of the Bible I want us to look at is Psalm 56. But there's a very important piece of context to Psalm 56. 1 Samuel 21 and 11 to 15. And there's a very important fact you need to know. Goliath came from Gath. Okay? Goliath came from Gath. And you know the story of David and Goliath. That's some of the context. So this is what it says. David rose and fled that day from Saul and went to Achish, the king of Gath. And the servants of the king said to him, Is not this David, the king of the land? Did they not sing to one another of him in dances? Saul has struck down his thousands, and David his 10,000s. And David took these words to heart and was much afraid of the king. So he changed his behaviour before them and pretended to be insane and made marks on the doors of the gate and let his spittle run down his beard. Then the king said to his servants, Behold, you see the man is mad. Why then have you brought him to me? Do I lack madmen, that you have brought this crazy fellow to behave as a madman in my presence? Now, hands up if you've ever read that bit of the Bible before. It's an interesting part of the Bible, and it gives a context, but it also provides a context to Psalm 56, because Psalm 56, like many of the Psalms, is written at a specific moment for a specific context. And in this one it says, written by David when the Philistines had seized him in Gath. So therefore, in the midst of this event, David wrote this psalm. And I'd encourage you to read it for yourself, but there's one particular verse that I want us to focus on. It's verse 3. When I am afraid, I put my trust in you. When I am afraid, I put my trust in you. And David must have been really fearful. There he was in the midst of the heartland of his enemies. He had killed Goliath, their champion. You'd imagine they weren't exactly happy to see him there. And he was so driven to protect himself, he was so fearful, he pretended to be insane. Now, can you imagine how that must have felt like for him to keep that up days and days and days, because there'd be many people who probably wanted to kill him. And in the midst of that encounter, he says this, when I am afraid, I put my trust in you. Now, I'm not suggesting that any of us are going to be in a situation when we have to pretend we're insane to avoid being hurt. But we all share the idea of feeling fear and uncertainty, of feeling a sense of what's the future going to bring, a feeling that whether are we going to get to the end of the day, the week, the month, or the year, and still be actually in one piece, emotionally or spiritually or psychologically, even physically. And that's when this verse becomes so important. It's such a simple verse that we can think of it and remember it. When we are afraid, we put our trust in God. That can seem a hard thing to do because we want solutions, we want answers, we want strategies. And yet God says, trust me. Trust me, even though you don't quite see what's going to happen, even though you're not quite sure where the answer's going to come from, you need to trust me. Interestingly, we looked last night at the first session of Hope Explored at the story of Jairus, who was actually somebody who wanted Jesus to come and heal his daughter. And you know the story, Jesus came with him, and then Jesus got distracted by somebody else. And Jairus had to sit there and wait. And just as when Jesus was ready to go to his house to resume the journey, Jairus got the news that his daughter had died. Don't bother Jesus anymore. And then Jesus said, don't be afraid, just believe. And Jairus had a choice to make. Was he going to put his trust in Jesus when he was afraid? Or was he going to put his faith in what he saw around him? Well, he chose to put his faith in Jesus with fear and trembling. And I think that's what we're called to do. All Saints is a church that has so many good things going for it, and we'll reflect on some of those in the context of these meetings. But we are fearful. What's it going to mean for us as a church? What's the future hold for us in this country? What does All Saints' future be? Maybe you're in a situation right now when you're feeling a sense of fear in your personal circumstances. What the Bible says is, when we are afraid, we put our trust in God. And as we read time and time again, God always has the last word. And God's last word is always right and honouring and good for us as well. So as we begin these meetings, let's pray together. Heavenly Father, we thank you for those verses in Psalm 56, rooted in those verses in 1 Samuel. David was fearful, fearing for his life. But in the midst of his fear, he put his trust in you. Help us as individuals and as a church, that when we are afraid, when we are uncertain, when we are fearful about the future, may we put our trust in you, and may that trust inspire and encourage and bless us, that we may not know what the future holds, but we know who holds our future. So we commit these meetings into your hands. Would you bless us through these meetings, and may the decisions we make be honouring to you. And we ask this in your name. Amen. So, this is the annual meeting of parishioners, and if you have the minutes from the annual meeting of parishioners in front of you on your tablet or otherwise, then the first thing we need to do is to approve the minutes. Now, I always say this, the person who proposes and seconds has to be somebody who was actually at the meeting. In my last church, I once had somebody propose the acceptance of the minutes of the annual meeting, and then someone told me 10 minutes later, there's a problem, he wasn't there last year. So we had to go back on ourselves. So you need to have been at the Zoom meeting last year in order to propose. So are there any amendments or clarifications on the meeting of parishioner minutes from 24th of May last year? In that case, was somebody who was on the Zoom call like to propose they have an accurate record? Jenny Lawson. Someone like to second? Frank Millwood. All those in favour? Any abstentions? Any against? I do apologise. There is a formality about these meetings, but you have to do it the right way because that's the way the Church of England does things. So, moving on, the purpose of the meeting of parishioners is to elect our church wardens for the next year. And the minute I began this meeting, nominations closed. I've had 2 nominations for church warden, and that's from Jessica Crossley and Dave Taylor. So, but as well as them being elected as church wardens, we also have 2 deputy wardens. Now, up to this point, Jenny Lawson and Chris Hack have been our other wardens who are wardens in the other years. Chris Hack has decided now his PCC time of office has come to an end to also step back from being a church warden, but assuming he's elected to PCC shortly, Tim Kingsman has agreed to become part of the church wardening team. Tim, because people may not know who you are, can you Tim stand up? That's Tim. He is standing. In case you didn't hear that, there was a derogatory comment about Tim made by Tim, so that's all right. But I'm delighted that Tim's joining the team. And I also want to say a big thank you to Chris. He's been a source of wisdom, and he will continue to be involved because he's got a real knowledge and passion about buildings, which you need on a PCC. So Chris will carry on being involved, although he's not on the PCC. And that means Dave and Jessica, I formally say, you are elected as church wardens for this year. And Jenny and Tim, assuming you're elected to PCC, will be deputy wardens. And the plan will be they'll become church wardens next year. Let's give a round of applause to our church wardening team. I forgot to say there were some apologies. We'll cover the apologies at the beginning of the annual meeting because they're the same for both, but they'll be recorded as both. And as there was any other business notified before the meeting, I hereby say that the meeting of parishioners for 2022 is closed. Isn't it great when meetings are that quick? My training incumbent once had a little competition with himself. How quickly could he do the meetings, annual meetings, in an evening? His record was 35 minutes. For both of them. He did speak quite quickly and just didn't catch anyone's eye. Anyway, so we move on to our next meeting, the annual parochial church meeting. Let me welcome you to that. And Alex, can you tell us the people who have sent their apologies?
Yep. We have apologies from Bill Godfrey, Catherine Allen, Pat Hall, Lisa Coe, Carol Stewart, Elsa Cummins, Chloe and Jill Brooke.
No, it's Clive and Jill Brooke.
Oh, sorry, Clive.
That's my writing. Sorry, Clive.
You should be a doctor. Charlotte Jarvis, Peter and Janet Marshall, and Carol Stewart.
Okay, that's it. Yeah. Apologies. Any other apologies that you'd like to add into those? Sarah Saxton? Chris Lingard. Any other apologies? Steve and Anita Porter. Any others? Anne Roebuck. Any others? Okay. Now, we also have to firstly approve the minutes of the APCM from last year, May 24th. I'm sure you remember it. It was on Zoom. So hopefully, again, if you've had a copy of the minutes, you'll be able to have looked through them. Are there any amendments or corrections that people want to pass on? In which case, would somebody who was there actually formally propose that we accept the minutes as a true record of the meeting? Jessica Crossley, would someone like to second? Kate Brown got there first. Kate Brown got there first, but thank you, Pat, for being willing to third it. All those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? One abstention. Okay, 3 abstentions, because they weren't there. You weren't there, Roland, absolutely right. And so just 3 abstentions. Okay, matters arising not covered elsewhere. We'll perhaps come back to those at the end of the meeting. Just by the way, at the end of the meeting, there will be a time for questions and answers. Some people say that vicars should never throw the floor open to questions, but it always improves your prayer life when you do that. So at the end of the meeting, if there are questions that haven't been covered, there'll be an opportunity to ask questions, and hopefully, if I can't answer them, Adam will. So that will be good. So let's move on. Just some opening remarks from me, and I really have made them already. It's great to be back in the church building with our annual meeting. And it's just another example of how we can use this building to be a real help and encouragement. But what's more encouraging is that the building's continuing to be used in all sorts of different ways. One of the most recent things has been a Tuesday morning meeting for some refugees from Ukraine who have moved into the local area. And I just want to say thank you to all those from the church family who worked so hard. The third one happens tomorrow. And from what I've heard, they've gone really, really well. And I know they've been a great blessing. So it's brilliant to be here in the church building and to use those buildings in that way. But I also, and I'll say this a bit later on in my reflections, just a thank you for the support and help you've given me in the past year. As you know, one day I'm going to stand up and say nothing much has happened this year. But lots of things have happened this year, not least the fact that I was off work for 2 months in November and December. And thank you so much for the support and the encouragement and the love that people showed to me, the way that people stepped up in my absence, the way that people really sort of helped out and helped each other, particularly helping Adam and the church wardens. It was so appreciated, and we really are thankful. It's a real expression of the love and support that we felt, that I felt from the church family. So thank you very much. I'll say a bit more later on when it comes to my vicar's reflections, but the first thing we need to do is to elect members to our PCC. Now, before we do that, I need to say some thank yous, because there are some PCC members who are not standing again this year for various reasons. I've already mentioned that Chris Hack is not standing again, but also Drew Wiggins, Kate Brown, Michael Frankland and Frank Millwood are also not standing again to be on the PCC. So I want to say thank you to them for their hard work and for their commitments and their involvement. I always say there are three apart from the legal qualifications on the nomination form, there are three other qualifications to be a PCC member. One, you need to be a committed Christian. Now, you might think it's an obvious one, but that's not always the case in the Church of England. 2, you need to be committed to the mission and ministry of all saints. And 3, you need to be not afraid to speak out and tell us what you think. And that's really important. And in different ways, all of them have done exactly those things. So I want to say thank you to them and thank you to their hard work. We really appreciate it. There are some other people on the PCC who were standing down, but re-standing, if you like. But can we show our appreciation to those who are standing down? Thank you very much. Now, PCC, the size of a PCC is dictated by a set of rules, and often that comes by the size of the electoral roll. Now, our electoral roll is over 200, which means we have 15 elected lay vacancies to fill every year. Now, some of them are already filled by people whose terms of office continue on. But we have 10 vacancies to fill, and I have had 5 nominations. The nominations are from Alison Hodson, from Dave Tate, that's the church warden. Don't worry, Dave, you're not being elected again. Let me do that. So Alison Hodson, from Paul Dix, from Tim Kingsman, from Jenny Lawson, and from Kate Rudd. On the basis you may not know who they are, could those people just stand up? Okay, sorry, Tim, it's you again. So you can see. And actually, could other members of the PCC who are continuing to be on the PCC, could you stand up as well? Because I always assume everybody knows everybody at All Saints. And I have to realise that sometimes people don't know everybody. Okay, so please be seated. So, now, it is possible for people to be nominated at this meeting. And it can happen. So, if that is something you're desperately wanting to do and you haven't shown your interest, speak now or forever hold your peace. In which case, I'd like to say that those 5 people have been duly elected to the PCC, and I'm really delighted that they have been. The PCC is a very important body. They're the people who ultimately make some of the key strategic decisions in the life of the church, and their wisdom and their ability to speak out and share their views and opinions is key. PCC meetings can be feisty, but they're always done in fellowship, and that's how they should be. Now, obviously, that means we have 5 vacancies where we can co-opt people onto the PCC. So therefore, if you know of someone who you think, they'd be a really good person to be on the PCC, well, if you could let me know, maybe you might like to approach them first, because what will happen, the PCC at its various meetings can actually vote people on by themselves. So these vacancies can be filled And there may be people who haven't considered it, or maybe thought, well, I'm not sure if it's the right thing to do. But if you think there is somebody who would be really good to be on the PCC, then please encourage them and maybe have a word with me as well. And then if they are willing to, we can discuss that at our next PCC meeting. So thank you so much. Let's give a round of applause to the PCC members for all the work that they do. Okay, moving on. This is good. I was going to say there is questions at the end. By the way, if there are any questions as we go throughout the meeting, please do ask them. There will be opportunity at the end to ask questions. Now, the next is the electoral roll report. This is just to let you know, the electoral roll is basically the closest we have to a membership list. Effectively, being on the electoral roll means you have the right to vote at these meetings, and that's the main responsibility, but it also gives us an opportunity to see who feels that they're committed to the life of All Saints. And every year there is a revision that takes place, and people who choose to come off are taken off, and people who choose to come on are coming on. Well, this year, our electoral roll number is 210. I think that's 3 more than last year. Obviously, some have come off, others have come on. There can still be people who choose to come on during the year, but actually I think it's in 2025, I could be wrong about that, there's a couple of years' time, there's a complete revision of the electoral roll where basically the whole roll is scrapped and people have to apply to be on it, and that means at that moment often you find numbers tend to decline because sometimes people are on the electoral roll. I have to say, and I won't say who they are, there are some people's names on the electoral roll that I have never met, and I don't know who they are. I'm not going to say who they are, but it just goes to show that sometimes people end up being on an electoral roll and then eventually they come off because they don't realise that they want to come off in the first place. So our electoral roll, now we can't distribute this generally because of GDPR regulations, but there is a copy available. We'll have a copy available at the back of church in the next few weeks, and you can request a copy, or you can request, if you contact Jerry in the office, if you want to know if a specific individual is on the electoral roll, you can do so. But the copy will be available at the back of church for you to look at later if you wanted to. And we'll have a copy available over the next few weeks as well for you to see that. Any questions about the electoral roll? In which case, I'm going to hand over to Frank, who is going to bring us our financial summary and the approval of the annual accounts. Frank, I will be your clicker, so just nod at me when you want things to move on.
Fine, thanks. How do I follow Mike with his confidence inspiration? So, 2 years ago, as Mike said, I did a presentation by looking at an iPad. Last year I did the same, and tonight I can see your smiling faces. And welcome to you, those that are drinking coffee or elsewhere at the back of the camera. So, like Mike has just said, I believe this is a time of celebration for last year, the achievements and thoughts of the life of our church. I recall one talk by Brian some years ago when he mentioned that there were approximately 100 volunteers doing various tasks behind the scenes, which helped to complete a huge jigsaw of God's love in this church. Turning to the accounts, I would like to thank Jonathan Frank, who some of you will know from the past, for approving the accounts, Julia, our bookkeeper, for her skills in turning our data into somewhat complex accounts, but obviously okay accounts, and those who have helped me to bank the collections, and to Brian once more for this time, achieving £36,000 by way of gift aid for the following year because of your generous giving. So, if we go on to the first slide, if I may. Oh, I can see it down there. Right. It's beautiful. Whoa, the digital age. Right. If you look at the first line, the voluntary givings, and if I cheat and also add on 2019, your wonderful giving has created £571,000 over the last 3 years, which is, I believe, a truly remarkable sum for any church. So every personal contribution, whether it was £10, £20, £40, £80 or more, has really been very much appreciated by the PCC and has enabled us to plan ahead. Although you'll see the voluntary givings are down by about 9,000 there, a little bit more when you consider gift aid as well. The PCC were aware of this. They knew that we were entering the second year of a pandemic, so we simply included £12,000 of the small business grant that we'd received in 2020 and carried it forward as income to support the likely income shortfall. If you remember, the church wasn't opened. We didn't have any hiring at the facilities until July, bringing in money, etc. The second line shows the Youth Workers Fund, and what a fantastic improvement there during the year. What am I doing?
You just keep leaning over that way.
I think so. Right, okay. Right. Okay. Yes. Going back to the Youth Worker Fund, we've had another walk in 2021 by our West Ham supporter, and also further gifts from individuals, etc. This year, adding on to that figure, we've had another £1,000 gift and also a pledge of £5,000. So we're definitely moving in the right direction of considering the possibility for a youth work. Legacy. I used to be involved in legacies in my first tranche of work in the Midland Bank. So Mike has already referred to this aspect in the stewardship campaign this year. In 2020, there were 3 wonderful legacies, and last year there was 1 legacy. Some of you will recall in 2017, we were shown a video here in the church, and 2 vicars highlighted how similar monies have made a huge difference for them. One example was that a church hall had been modernised, and another, the slabs outside had been levelled to improve getting into the church. And I think that is important, because in my church in 2006, the church secretary slipped on a slab, broke a thigh, and the vicar suggested she sue for £20,000, which she did get. Fortunately, it was paid by the insurance company, of course. So, going back to the legacies, on a personal basis, I'm sure all of you in Ilkley especially will know that legacies to whoever are free of inheritance tax and can reduce the possible tax liabilities by 40% on such gifts. When I was talking to high-value customers in Lincolnshire, a lot of them went regarding, an inheritance or retirement, and looking at wills. I used to use as an example that if somebody gave £1,000 to the Lincoln Cathedral Fabric Fund or to the RNLI, there's a lot of coast on Lincolnshire, then by giving £1,000, if their estate was over what the threshold is now, £325,000 for a single person, then they'd save 40%. So in effect, the gift only costs £600. And a lot of people who have made money always want to save tax. Anyway, I'll move on to the next slide, which is over there. Right. Hiring out of the premises. You'll see there the increases. I've already mentioned that last year we didn't receive any monies until July, and obviously the bulk of that then will be the Ilkley Festival. This year we've already received £2,000, and obviously we're expecting more from the Ilkley Festival, and we were hoping in the budget for, say, £9,000 out of that, which will help when we're reconsidering the parish share. Church fees, again, have improved, benefiting perhaps because of more happy married couples, making up for the disappointments they had in 2020 when the majority of churches were closed. Church House Improvement Fund. Well, again, I'm going to refer to my notes here. The figure incorporates the 30,000 grant Derek obtained some time ago, a 6,000 legacy, and obviously your continuing generous gifts last year. I've got an apology to make here. I incorrectly indicated we were likely to receive the final 10% of our Heritage Lottery grant in the summer. I now realise I looked at all the details incorrectly in 2019, because to get the final 10%, you had to spend all of the invoices, which they would then calculate the 70% on. I'll go back through that. We have only put in invoices with the help of Helen that have brought in 88 or 90% of the costings. So we saved money because in the original costings, an amount was put in for contingency and it was put in for possible inflation. And that was around £50,000. David Dobson very kindly never claimed for any of that contingency. He never claimed for any inflation as well. So we saved money there and obviously didn't have the invoices to put forward. We also employed 2 members of the heritage staff rather than the 3 that we had originally envisaged in the grant application. So, as I just said, we're only going to be claiming up to 90% of that grant. On a more positive note, Derek has mentioned before the possibility of our obtaining a grant of £40,000, and I hope the time doesn't expire there. I also believe there'll be a possible £30,000 by our obtaining a refund of VAT on our Grade 2 buildings when the invoices are submitted. So, leading on to expenditure. The parish share, we've increased this by, it's moved on, expenditure, sorry. We increased the payment by 5.8% this year, and over the last 3 years, we've recovered from paying £139,000 to last year £159,000. The request from the diocese was £172,000. This year, the diocese is requesting £174,000, as they expect, if you like, the larger churches like in here and Harrogate to try and help out those churches in Bradford where they're really struggling for income, and we wish Christianity still to be the forefront. The PCC have already committed to paying 90% of this figure in 2022, and obviously the new PCC can take into account any additional monies we get this year, such as from the hiring out of our premises. Mission giving. This is normally now, thanks to Mike's good idea, following the harvest service that we have in September. This year, for example, you kindly gave, and with the gift aid, it was about £5,300. And then the PCC agreed that we should increase that to £6,000. We also paid another £750 for the Ilkley Hub, where they create documents, paperwork, to help in schools, to help in Sunday schools, where we're trying to get the message of the love of Christ to young children. This is our way forward if we're going to survive. We need families in our church, and certainly we do in Lincolnshire. Where are we? Yes, going back to 2020, you might think, why is that higher? Well, in 2020, when we got this small business grant, I suggested, or should I say, I put it to the PCC that we pay 10% of the small business grant that was 3,500 to increase those mission givings. So that's why they look higher than this year. What I haven't meant on there, put down there, is utilities. The good point is that all our utilities at the moment are fixed. Our gas is fixed, our electricity fixed. One expires next year, one expires 2024, when hopefully the horrible things that are going on in Ukraine can be resolved. So much unsettling news on the news from that area. So if we go on to our reserves, our reserves have recovered to almost where they were in 2018. They virtually disappeared in 2019 when we paid for all the building invoices, etc., until we were able to lodge claims for VAT back and the HLF grant. Legacies have helped us to recover the reserves, plus those small business grants, and also 3 years of what I call depreciation accruals. Those reserves I've set out there are not set in stone. I've mentioned this to the PCC several times, because obviously we're trying to look ahead, and a treasurer should always be trying to look ahead. And at the moment, the PCC is concentrating on the possibility of a youth worker. And it was great when I first came to a service here where there was a confirmation where there were 5 young adults there, male adults who were confirmed. Let's get those times back again. So, in summary, your wonderful givings have continued our aim to reflect God's love for this church and for our community. You've made my life easy. If I can go on to the last slide now. Hooray, they say. It's about this parish giving scheme. I'm pleased to say that 22 people have joined it already, so we've made a good start. Nationally, within the Church of England, just over 50% of those that have joined the scheme have elected for the inflation, which is line 2 under the advantages for the church. But I'd like to raise a couple of points while I'm standing here. The form is very simple. I place my name, I place my bank account, I tick if I want to go for inflation each year or consider it, and I complete the gift aid form. And doing it online is as simple as that as well. And, well, it took me 7 minutes. I know it's taken 5 minutes, 10 minutes. It's a simple thing to do. And I believe, as an ex-banker, direct debits are even safer than the existing standing orders. I had problems increasing my standing order last year with my bank, so in the end I cancelled it and started again. I've had another lady this year who wanted to reduce it, and she couldn't reduce it, so I said cancel it and start again. So the direct debit, it's, as it says somewhere there, it's total control of giving. So, for those who want to, and as I say, around 50% have elected to increase. I made sure I got a letter from Janet Edmond, and that reassured me. On the anniversary of your starting, say you sign up in June, then next June you'll get a letter thanking you. That's more than I've been doing to you. A letter each year. It'll say that if, for example, you're paying 100 a month and inflation is 6, they're saying from next July it'll be £106 a month. But if you're not happy with that, then you can contact them, you can reduce it to £103, or you can say, no, I can't afford to increase it this year. So again, you have total control giving. For those, sorry, have I gone on too long? Sorry, oh, I'm wondering. I wonder. My wife tells me I wonder. Right. For those who don't wish to increase, and there's many reasons for this. With my last church, nearly half in Lincolnshire couldn't increase. I still believe it's a good thing to do because of the efficiency in the collection. When I went on my first treasurer's course in 2006, I was the youngest one at 60. One treasurer said, "Oh, I'll do it every 3 months." One said, "I do it every 6 months." One said, "Oh, I'll do it just before the end of the tax year." Well, that's no use in a church of this size where you're paying salaries every month, you're paying a high parish share every month, you're paying utilities every month. So the advantage of getting the money paid into our bank account of your giving and the advantage of getting the gift aid in your bank account each month, instead of getting 36 in the year, you're getting £3,000 a month. That is the great plus for me. And of course, to thank Brian and any future person who deals with the gift aid. Brian says that it takes him about 6 hours every time he's doing a return to transfer the items from the bank statements I send him to the forms. So if we can get more and more people to do it this way, then you're going to free up so much more time. I'm sure his wife would appreciate that, and the wife of anybody who does it in the future, or the husband. So there we are. I think I'll hand over now.
We'll stay there a second.
Are there any questions?
Now, Adam has a handheld microphone.
Oh, right.
That he's going to move amongst you. If you've got a question about the accounts for Frank, hopefully he can answer that. If not, I'll try and answer it if it's to do with me. So if you have a question, please indicate and wait till Adam gets good question time fashion. Wait till the microphone gets to you. Oh, one question down there.
I thought I got
I thought we got away there, Frank.
Yeah.
No, I just have one question about the building work and everything. Effectively, we've still got to do something in the church house, and I just wondered if we know how much it's likely to cost and how close we are to being able to do that.
I'm going to say something about that in my vicar's reports that might help indicate where we're going to go with that, and that might indicate what the answer to the question will be. But we will come to that, I promise. Any other questions or question down here for Kate from Kate Rob?
So actually, it's not a question, Frank. It's a thank you. The job of a treasurer is often unseen and involves a huge amount of work and lots of detail, and not everybody's up for it. So I just want to say a big thank you.
Thank you. You've all made it easy for me. There's always been money in the bank.
Hang on. You go back to, hang on. If you go on one, Adam, can you go on one? Don't go anywhere, Frank. We'll have to get a new clicker because of my clicking finger. Because you beat me to it, Kate. Because, as you know, this is Frank's last APCM as treasurer. He's standing down after 3 years. And I want to say thank you to Frank because he has been a great source of calmness, of wisdom. If he remembers when he first started those meetings, we sat down trying to work out where the money was going to come to finish off the development fund. And often I had some crazy ideas, and then Frank took them and distilled them into sensible ones. So Frank has been a tremendous help and an encouragement. So although we've said thank you to him, let's say thank you again. Frank, thank you so much.
Thank you as well for what you've done.
Thank you. I also need to say some other thank yous. As Frank mentioned, Brian Harris, who's been faithfully doing the gift aid for the past however many years, is also stopping doing that work at the end of June. And also Julia Jordan, our bookkeeper, is leaving at the end of June. It's not me, honestly, it isn't me. She having served with us. So first of all, we are putting together the advert for a new bookkeeper. That will be going out hopefully next week, and it may be something you'd be interested in or somebody you know in the church family or otherwise will be interested in. And we're hoping, because of the parish giving scheme, that the gift aid will be rolled into that work as well, because there'll be less work involved in it, and therefore it seems obvious to be able to do that. So I want to say publicly thank you to Brian, and also thank you to Julia as well for their hard work, because church finances are a slight mystery, to me anyway, and so you need people around you. Now, apart from the sad news about Frank standing by, is tempered because we have a new, assuming they are appointed by the PCC, a new PCC treasurer, and that is Peter Crossley. So Peter, thank you very much. Peter is already stepping into the role, so if you want to stand against him, you're very welcome to. So assuming he's appointed at the first PCC meeting, and in my experience, that is the quickest election in history. Okay, so Peter, thank you for being willing to stand forward and to do that. Again, if you've got any other questions that you'd like to raise and you want to at the end of our meeting today, please have a chat with Frank. And particularly the parish giving scheme, I started doing it. It is so much easier to do. And if it's something you haven't thought about or something you're thinking it sounds very complicated, it really is very straightforward. And Frank will be very happy, and so would I, to explain a bit more about that. Moving on, we have the next item, which we need to appoint an independent examiner of our finances. Our thanks go to Peter Stewart, who has done the job in the past, and he stepped down. Another person stepping down. There's a theme developing here. It's not me. But we do have, as Frank mentioned, someone called Jonathan Frank, who how many of you actually know Jonathan? Well, there you go. I realised I knew Jonathan not because of All Saints, but we shared doing a venture together about 20 years ago. We discovered that when we went to a barbecue at Graham's house, and I thought, I know you, and he did the same thing with me. So Jonathan has very happily authorised our accounts. I realised we probably need to approve the accounts. I'll come back to... Actually, do we need to formally approve the accounts? We do. You can tell I don't do this very often. I've signed them off, but it might be good. All those in favour of approving the annual accounts as set out in the paperwork, would you please indicate? Any against? Any abstentions? They're formally approved. I will sign them off. And also, assuming that Jonathan is willing to be appointed as our independent examiner for next year, Dave, are you aware that he is happy to do that? Let's assume he might well be. We'll ask him. But assuming he is willing to do it, I would like to propose that we appoint Jonathan as our independent examiner. Would someone like to second that? Peter Rudd seconds. All those in favour? We'll tell him it was unanimous. And that means he can't say no. Well, he could say no, you see. Now, we're going to have a short break because my reflections and report come next. We've been sitting down for the best part of 3 quarters. So have a few minutes just to stretch your legs or to sort of stand up, and I'll call us back to order in a couple of minutes' time, and we'll enter the last few moments, or the last few items of the meeting. So take a few minutes break. If you've got any cups, you might like to take them back to the kitchen, and I'll give you a call. If you have any questions you want to ask Frank, please come and talk to him, and then I'll call you back in a few minutes' time, and we'll continue. Yeah, thank you. The next bit of our meeting, I think it said service there, our meeting is my reflections and reports. We'll then have a time of questions and answers, and I will give you a short while to talk to those around you if there are any particular questions. I did ask if questions could be notified before the meeting. We had one, which I've answered indirectly to the person concerned, but I'm happy to have other questions if they will be helpful to us. But I think it'd be helpful just to me, as you said, this reflections and reports. It does, as I've said earlier on in the meeting, the last 12 months have continued to be a time of unprecedented change and challenging. And we've all, even though we're coming out of COVID, it's still a very real, it's still a reality. There are a number of people in our church family, maybe people you know, who are suffering from COVID. And my knowledge has been that although the symptoms may be less, the tiredness and the fatigue is more. So we need to continue to support and encourage those, not just who are suffering from COVID, but those who are suffering from all that's happened in these past couple of years. Because none of us expected or anticipated what the last 2 years were going to be like. And I'm aware that even now, people are going through difficult times of anxiety and worry and sadness. And I think it's really important that we as a church family continue to lovingly support and care for everyone in our church family together. We need to be prayerful and we need to encourage people not to be backwards in coming forwards about sharing their needs. And that's why things like the WhatsApp group, if you're on the WhatsApp group, has become a great source of sharing prayer requests and sharing information. So we want to find other ways where we can continue to support and encourage each other. But I always think, when I was a curate, my training incumbent said, whenever you start your vicar's report, start by thanking people. Because there's so many things and so many people to be thankful for. As I said earlier on, the support and the encouragement that you gave me personally, not just during the 2 months I was off work, but in the rest of the year, has been invaluable. And I can't overstate how important it's been. And I know that Lisa feels exactly. And you'll be pleased to know I am back to my normal self, which some people say isn't a good thing, but learning some important lessons. But if you think that I'm actually doing things incorrectly that might be doing, don't be afraid to come and talk to me about it. One of the things about being publicly weak and vulnerable is you can't hide it. And that's why it's important that people are caring and are supporting. So please continue to do that. And I want to say thank you to everybody in the church family, those of you who've been involved in any ways, but there are some particular people that I'd love to say thank you to. A thank you to Adam and Diana, the clergy team alongside Dick, who have been a tremendous support and encouragement. So Adam has had a very uneventful first year as a curate. Really, nothing much has really happened. I'm not surprised, but he's put up with an awful lot, not just in terms of stepping up into leadership, as Diana did when I was off work, but also with Alexander arriving. My record is that usually curates leave their curacy with more children than they arrived. I've never had it happen so quickly as with the Roebuck family. So thank you to Adam and thank you to Diana. I also want to say thank you to Dick and Fiona, who are also part of the team. It's wonderful that they are using their gifts and abilities, not just here at All Saints, but in other churches around the local area. Fiona particularly at Blubberhouses and Fewston, and it's great to see the reports you put on the WhatsApp group for what's happening there. And I consider Fiona as a bit of our missionary to the north, you know, which not very far north, admittedly, but also Fiona's also going as part of her ministry to Zermatt. I nearly said Lucerne there, but that was changing. It's Zermatt as well. So thank you to Fiona and thank you to Dick. And of course, don't worry, Fiona's pointing at Margaret. I do know that. I'll come to that later. Actually, I assume you were pointing at Margaret there. Never mind. Okay. But thank you to them for their hard work. My thanks to the church wardens, to Jenny, to Jessica, to Dave and to Chris, because they've not been afraid to challenge me as well as support me. And that's really helpful and really vital. So thank you to them. Thank you to the PCC members for their support and encouragement. A big thank you to the people in the office. Thank you to Alex, not just for taking the minutes tonight and for the PCC, but for the way she stepped into when there was a gap between Alice and Jerry. So Alex, thank you for your hard work. And thank you to Alice, who's still a very part of it. Fiona, stop pointing at people. Fiona, okay, come here. You can say thank you to Dave. Okay, you don't want to do that. So you want to say thank you to you, David, as well. I was coming to that. Let me finish. But thank you to Alex. Thank you to Alice and thank you to Jerry. It was difficult to think how we were going to replace Alice. But Jerry is Alice, but in a different way. Jerry is fantastic. And Jerry, and if you haven't met her, she's a wonderful asset to us as a church family. Thank you to David and other members of the preaching team who preach from time to time and led services. And thank you to those leading saints and little saints and doing the coffee and the AV team and the worship team and the organists. This is when I'm fearful I'm missing someone out. If I haven't mentioned your particular work, you are thanked. The most important person I think I need to thank is Lisa. You have no idea how much you owe her, because she's talked me out of some ideas that I was going to inflict on All Saints, and she just said, no, we're not going to do that, and I haven't done it. But as quite rightly when Fiona pointed at Margaret, every minister needs to have the support of their family, and Lisa has been a constant source of love and support, and I couldn't do it without her, and I wouldn't want to do it without her, so a big thank you to Lisa. Have I missed anyone, Fiona? Oh, yeah, Michael, our caretaker. Oh, of course, yeah, Michael Walker, our caretaker. And also Carrie and Joy, our heritage team. See, this is the danger when you start saying thank you to people. It sounds like an Oscars speech. So Michael Walker, despite being a Man United fan, sorry, Tim, although it's sympathy there at the moment. And also to Carrie and Joy, our heritage team, who are both coming to the end of their contracts. They've been a fantastic resource. This is such a tremendous asset. Every time I'm in here and someone comes to visit, they are really bowled over by how much history and heritage they can learn, and the exhibitions. And we hope in some way that will continue. We've still got to talk about it with them, but we're going to pass on our thanks to them as well. If I haven't mentioned you by name, come and tell me afterwards. I'll thank you personally, or if I've missed anyone out. So thank you. But also, last year has been a time of challenge and change. We have a new curate. We have a new church administrator. We have a new pattern of weekly services. And I do think the bringing together of the 9:15 and the 11 o'clock Sunday services into one united service has been, together with the Wednesday service of communion at 11 o'clock, has given us a weekly pattern that is both diverse and creative, a blend of traditional and contemporary, but always centred around faithful and relevant Bible teaching. And I think it's been a great blessing. We're also now an online church. Those of you watching online will know that perfectly well as we live stream our 10:15 services. I know there are many people who can't make it to church for various reasons, or people who live in different parts of the country who are able to join with us in worship. And that's been a real learning curve. The AV team has been a tremendous source of learning and knowledge. And we have this challenge of how do we make the blend between online worship and in-person worship meaningful for the people engaging in either. But it's also true to say that this year will be a time of change and a time of challenge, because we need to continue to build up the saints and to seek out the lost. And that will always be at the very heart of what happens here at All Saints. We need to faithfully hold on to the things that should never change, but we need to boldly be willing to change the things that stop us fulfilling our God-given task to be a blessing to our community and a beacon for the gospel. And although it might not seem like it, we are one of the best resourced churches in the whole diocese. There are many vicars and many church families who come and look around what we have here, not just our buildings, but the gifts and the talents of the people in the church family, and really are just bowled over and looking and learning from what we're doing. But we need to make sure that we use what God has given us to be a support and an encouragement to the wider church in the deanery and the diocese. Part of that's through our parish share, which, as Frank mentioned, we are probably the highest paying parish share church in the diocese, certainly in Bradford Diocese. And that's something we joyfully and willingly do to support ministry in other parts of the diocese. It's also true in my job as Area Dean of South Craven and Wharfdale, because part of my time is supporting other churches and other ministers in their mission and their ministry as well. But we also want to be open to the new opportunities that we have that God has given us to share our faith through our words and our actions so that people in our community can hear the good news of Jesus. And those priorities should always be built upon the Bible's teaching. The great command to go into all the world and preach the gospel, and the great commandment to actually love our neighbour as we love ourselves, having loved God first. What does that look like for us in our context and our culture? That's something we need to continually ask in every circumstance. And that means that as we look ahead to the next 12 to 18 months, amongst all the things we need to be doing as a church to reach out with the gospel, there are some particular things that I think we need to focus on. We need to focus on increasing our togetherness as a church. The change of our Sunday worship service, going from 2 services to 1, I think has been a great encouragement. I've been really impressed and really encouraged by the new people who've come along. And I do believe it's given us a foundation for greater mission and outreach. But I know this process hasn't been easy. And I know that some have really struggled with this change, because even good change is challenging. And I know it has not been universally popular. And I know that some people have chosen to worship elsewhere as a result of that. Now, I'm sorry about that. And I want to apologise if the way that I and we have handled these events has not been helpful to you. That's never something we set out to do. But the change has also highlighted something, the one thing I have found discouraging in my time here. There's so much about All Saints which is brilliant. We feel so much that this is the right place for us as a family, and I've been so blessed by you as a church family and by being the vicar here of this church. But there is one thing I have found discouraging, and it is the separateness that I've come across that does seem to exist in the church family. I've written about that in some of the letters last year. Now, we all have our personal preferences when it comes to worship services. But it has saddened me when I've come across the attitude of some people who said they're only willing to come to worship services that suit their personal preferences, and they rarely, if ever, come to worship services that don't. And I say this next bit with a great love and great respect for the whole church family, but also recognising the leadership and the position of authority I have at All Saints. Separateness in our church family is not honouring to God, and we need to work hard to overcome that. And I think it weakens our mission and ministry. We need everyone to be involved proactively in our mission and our ministry, because our fellowship and our effectiveness in outreach is hindered if you're not part of it. If you're not part of it. Everyone needs to be part of it, because we all have an important role to play. So I'd encourage you to pray for a greater unity that is both instinctive and also focused in Christ. And be encouraged. New people are coming to church. Just yesterday, some people came along, and one of the things they said, and you always have to be careful about bigging up a church, they said, "This is the most welcoming church I've ever been to," which is fantastic to have as a reputation. And that's because everybody, is part of that welcome. I tend to say everybody's on the welcome team. And I think it's something we need to continue to prayerfully and practically work towards, that reducing that separateness that has existed, not just in my time, but I believe has existed over several years and several vicars. The second priority is our children's and youth work. Since Ollie departed last year, the work's been overseen by a fantastic team of volunteers who've done a marvellous job in challenging circumstances, and we really are thankful to them, whatever age group they are working with. And I'm convinced of the vital importance of this work at All Saints. That doesn't mean to say that children and young people are more valuable than anyone else, because everybody, all ages, all life circumstances, all life situations, everyone is important at All Saints. But how we respond to the challenges and opportunities of children's and youth work in the coming years, I believe, will be critical to our thriving as a church. Someone once said to me, if you want to know what a church without a focused commitment on children's and young people will look like, then, well, have a good look at the people around you. Just have a good look at the people around you. Now, I want you to put 10 years on those people's ages, because if I'm here for the rest of my ministry, about 9-10 years-ish, then in 10 years' time, the church family will be us, but just 10 years older. Now, in many ways, that's great, because you'll still all be here. But we need to reach out to younger age groups. And by I say younger, anyone younger than me, and I'm 59. We need to reach out to younger age groups, to families with school-aged children. Because if we don't, then we're slowly going to decline as a church. And that has happened so much to other churches around us. and I'm sure you know many churches that are full of faithful Christians, but they're in decline because for whatever reason, their ability to connect with children and families and adults of school-age children is not something that's been successful. And that means we need specialised help. Children's and youth work is a specialised area. You know that because when Lawrence was here, it was a real blessing to the church. I know that. I used to be a children's and youth worker. So I think actually in the coming months, as has already been indicated, we'll consider our options of how we can effectively resource and fund the children and young people's work. And that may well be looking towards employing a full-time children's and youth worker, and we'll be considering that as a PCC. The third area is we need to consider our environmental awareness and impact as a church. We've just finished a sermon series a few weeks ago looking at the question, why should we care for the environment? Because this is an issue that is not just important to us, it's important to the wider community. I can almost guarantee whoever you come across, there'll be somebody there'll have a concern about the environment, and that's particularly true for young people. They seem to be particularly concerned about the environment. And one of the ways we respond as Christians, as we looked at in the sermon series, is because it's the right thing to do, because creation belongs to God, because Jesus is at the heart of it, because we want to be a blessing to our neighbours, and because as we care for the creation, we point people to God. But one of the key things of that whole sermon series was how we could respond practically with initiatives. So we have the recycling station at the back of church. I've never seen the bin for medicine blister packs fill up quite so quickly, and that's without many people in the community knowing it's there. But that's a really good use, something that's going to be a real help and encouragement. But that's just the start of our things. One of the things I'm going to put before the PCC in the next few months is how we can work towards becoming an eco-church. An eco-church is a particular church with a particular set of commitments and a particular set of actions. And I'll be looking for people to join a small group leading us in that, because our environmental awareness is something that we need to do. And finally, we also need to think about how we redevelop what I call the West Wing. The West Wing is not the TV series, it is Church House and number 6 Church Street. When I arrived here in 2018, I did detect a bit of fundraising fatigue when it came to buildings. It was almost as if people had said, look, this is great, but we need a break from this. Well, it's now 3-4 years on. And I know at our recent Wardens meeting, we reflected upon the need to refocus some attention to actually bring the facilities we have at the west part of the church, Church House and number 6 Church Street, to actually fulfil the project, albeit with maybe some changes because we're 4 years on from where we were 4 years ago. So we will be focusing on that. And we will be seeking how we can use our buildings, because our buildings are a great blessing to the community. The Literature Festival love coming here because not only is it a great facility, they can live stream and get more money. We had who was here at the Hustings event? That's the warmest the church has ever been. I'll leave you to make the joke yourself, you see. But there are lots of ways that the church building is being hired out. Church House is being used by a guitar group, a wine appreciation society, a jazz group, and there's lots of other bookings, flower bookings, lots of things happening. And by the way, the church wardens and those with the keys often fight to see who opens up for the wine appreciation group. I don't know why that is, you see. But we're delighted that the buildings are being used in a blessing, and we want to develop them more and finish off the project. And that will be a focus of our discussions in the coming weeks and months. But I've spoken a lot, and we'll come to some questions in a short while. Next slide, please, Adam. I want us to finish this particular bit because it's not really about buildings, it's not really about workers, and it's not really about environmental initiatives. We're here because we're Christians, and we want people to share our faith in Christ. So whatever else we do, we need to make sure that everything we do enables us to do that better. And that's why this verse from Ephesians 3 is something that's a good thing to keep in mind. Now to him who is able to do immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine, according to his power that is at work within us, to him be glory in the church and in Christ Jesus throughout all generations, forever and ever. Amen. Or going back to Psalm 56, when we're afraid, we trust in him. And if we trust in him, I've always believed that God gives us the resources we need to do the work he wants us to do. And the biggest part of that resource is you, your gifts, your abilities, your enthusiasm, your faith. And so together, I do believe we can do something extraordinary as God works in us by his Spirit. And that's why we need all of us to be part of it. So thank you for your support and your encouragement. And now, next slide, please. We move for questions. Now, I'm going to give you a few minutes. Turn to those around you and perhaps discuss a question you might want to ask of me about the life of the church. I'd encourage you, if it's a particular personal issue, then have a chat with me afterwards. But if you feel it's a question that might be of general interest to the wider church family, that's a great question. This is always a moment when Psalm 56 verse 3 really comes to the fore for a vicar, because I have no idea. And usually if someone starts their question with vicar, I know it's going to be an interesting one. So I'll give you a few minutes, turn to those around you, chat about questions you might want to ask, and then we'll get Adam to move amongst you with a roving microphone, and we'll see where we get to. I'll give you 3 or 4 minutes to talk together, and then we'll come back to questions. Fantastic. Is the Christmas afternoon slightly delayed? Okay, so Adam has the microphone, and we'll go for as long as we need to. Who would like to ask, if anyone, the first question? Hands up, and Adam will come to you. Question from Margaret.
Thanks, Adam. Mike, are we doing anything for the Queen's Jubilee?
For the Queen's Jubilee, yes, what's happening is there's a civic service. Well, over that weekend, the service on Sunday will be special. The Bell Ringers is going to have a special open tower event. There is a civic service happening up at St Margaret's Church on the Sunday evening that's going to be sort of led by the Mayor. I think Bishop Toby's coming to speak as well. There are other events happening around Ilkley. I'm sure the church building will be open and there will be a particular display to encourage people to do that. And on that Sunday, it's Pentecost Sunday, Sunday, as well as being the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. So I've no doubt that those two things would become a focal point. Unfortunately, there was a plan to plant a tree in memory of the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. And this is when I discovered the complications. You might think planting a tree, you just dig a hole. You can't do that. Because this is a monument, this whole area, we have to get permission from the Department of Culture and Media to disturb the ground. I'm not making this up. So therefore, it may still happen, but it might happen after the Jubilee. And that's not because it's our fault. It's because literally there's a wealth of red tape we have to move through. But certainly, what's happening in the town, what's happening on Sunday, the service on Sunday morning, that will be a particular focus, giving thanks for the Queen, and the building will be open, and I'm sure we'll have appropriate displays as well as joining in with the other events.
Mike, do you mind if I just ask you,
Of course you can.
how do you feel that the church is progressing? Do you think we're getting back to how we were before the pandemic? I know we've lost an awful lot of people. And
It's difficult. I mean, the thing is, it is difficult to know. I think it's a question of how do you measure. On the one hand, I think that the atmosphere and the life and the fellowship is that side. He's gone that side.
No,
The atmosphere, the life and the fellowship. And I think there's a theology of hubbub. And I love it after a Sunday service. There is a whole noise of people talking together. In fact, yesterday, I realised there was 4 or 5 people who are here who are newcomers. And I looked around and they were all being spoken to by somebody who just happened to be near them, which was brilliant. So I think on that level, but obviously, there are some people, sadly, because of COVID, are still nervous about coming back. Some people are obviously, there may be some people who for various reasons aren't able to come back, and I know that's why online is so important to many people. But yes, there may be people who for various reasons are now worshipping elsewhere. I'm also conscious there's some people who may have got out of the habit of coming to church on a Sunday, and we need to prayerfully encourage them to come back. So I think we're heading in the right direction, but it's difficult to know exactly because we've almost got to get completely the other side of COVID, but then we'll see where we are. But I mean, on the whole, I'm encouraged, but I'm aware there are challenges we all have. Thank you. Fiona, then David.
I just wanted to ask really about a timeline for good pastoral care and home visiting and home communion.
One of the things we talked about at our Wardens meeting last week was how we put in place a pastoral care scheme. During COVID, pastoral care worked really well. We had the buddy scheme. Thank you to everyone who took part in that. And that was a tremendous way of providing direct pastoral care and concern. Now we're coming out of COVID, the buddy scheme is sort of still happening, but sort of not. So that's one of the things we need to look at. How can we, in a sense, get the buddy Mark II for those who are in need? But we also need to think, who do we need to provide pastoral care for and how do we do it? Home communion, pastoral visiting. That's one of the areas that we are going to be talking about as a PCC. We talked about it as a Wardens, and we have got some ideas of putting a group together to make plans for this. So it is something we're aware of, but obviously I would actually say it's very important if you are aware of people who are in need of particular pastoral support, it's helpful if you can let us know. I know people think vicars know everything, but it isn't true. The WhatsApp group's really helpful, but I don't mind being told by more than one person that somebody's in hospital or somebody's in need. I'm better to hear it from 3 people than not to hear it at all. But obviously we are working towards how we can put the pastoral care team back together in a sense, because it was in place. Just completely random, I'm hopeful that Pat Reed is going to come back for one final farewell Sunday in September, because we didn't get a chance to say goodbye to her properly. So I'm currently working on a Sunday in September when she's going to come back and be with us, and we can, because Pat was involved in the pastoral care. So watch this space. We'll let you know when that date's been finalised. But that's the plan. We are going to look at it because it needs to be put back together, but in the light of what's happening and the needs after COVID. David.
Mike, I'm glad that you emphasise the importance of employing a children's and youth worker for the future. I, in 10 years' time, wait for it, will be 83.
No.
83.
It's not true.
Now, I want to, this is not really a question. It's more a plea that we mean business about employing a really high quality, well-trained youth and children's worker. I'm very conscious, knowing how this kind of thing works around the country. The kind of excellent youth workers looking for a job, they're looking now. The adverts need to be out in the next, I would say, 3 or 4, at most 5 weeks over the summer, because most youth workers are being scooped up now and through the summer. You know, because they tend to start a contract in September, mid-September, at the very latest October. Now is the time to advertise, and that's going to mean increasing the funding for youth and children's. I mean, this may be too ambitious, but I really think it's important. Because otherwise, I think we will slip back yet further in really engaging youth and children. The potential in this church and in this town for thriving youth ministry is huge. We know that. We know it from decades past, and it's going to be even bigger in the future. We don't want to get a second-rate youth worker because we've advertised too late. I would say that I'm probably speaking to the converted in here and in the Sunday morning congregation as well. But I think that whatever the shortfall is likely to be, we need to have an appeal specifically to raise the extra money that we need to employ first-class children and youth worker. We must not shortchange children and youth work at All Saints, Ilkley. I will be 83 in 10 years' time.
He'll be 83 and I'll still be nervous when you do a Bible bite. It wasn't really a question, but I'm going to answer it as if it was. It is really important, absolutely. But what's very important is actually there is a trend sometimes for children's and youth workers to not be resourced properly and not be paid properly. So if we do employ a children's and youth worker, and there are some issues around, you're absolutely right. I read an article recently said that for many children's and youth workers, they're moving into ordination because it's the only way they can see being able to have a ministry that's paid for. But of course, the minute you go into full-time ministry as a vicar, that in a sense, it takes you away a bit from children's and youth work. So it's important that actually whatever we do is done properly, the person. And of course, living in Ilkley, even though it's the best place to live in the whole UK, you do realise it's only downhill from here. But that means it's a challenge as well. So I would encourage you, lobby your PCC members, because we will be discussing this in the next few weeks. Whether we are able to make the 5-week, as I say, I'm not sure, because there's an importance to get things right. But I do believe that the right person is out there. And I do believe that God is going to provide the right person for us, but we need to do it properly, and but it needs to have the support of the church family. And that's an important thing. So David, I didn't know you were 73. You don't look it. Is that the right answer? Yes, well done. But then thank you for that. But obviously, lobby your PCC members, because we will be discussing this in the next few months. Thank you. Any more questions? Jessica down here.
I don't know if this is a question, but really I'm just speaking for people on the live stream. I think some people found it really easy at the beginning to feel part of the congregation, but since more restrictions have been on the screen of taking shots of people in the congregation, it's really hard for people at home to see folk that they know. And I know that quite a few people are feeling quite isolated with that. So I don't know what the answer is, but I suppose I'm just wanting people at home to know that we possibly will be thinking about it a little bit more. Yeah.
In a sense, you're absolutely right. I mean, because I'd always encourage, now obviously some people watching online, they're watching because they can't actually come to the church building. That's been a real blessing. So I've visited a few people in the last few weeks who can't come to the church, can't come to services because of restrictions for them, and they really value that. I would always encourage people to come to church rather than watch online, and because I think it's a much better experience of fellowship here. But obviously, online is something we need to think, how do we get that blend right? The reason that we don't have people on screen is all to do with safeguarding and GDPR regulations. So that's not something we've chosen to do. It's something we've been advised not to do. And I think that's something we have to take advice from external. But we will be working hard to ensure that the online congregation is actually engaged and is as meaningful as possible for them, because it's now what we do. This is now a part of our church family very much. And hands up if you've ever watched a service online here at All Saints. That's just about, so you are part of the online congregation. So it's really important. So it's a very important thing to consider. And I'm delighted by the things we've invested in. I'm delighted by the ability it's given people with those skills and abilities to step up and lead us in that area, because I don't understand a lot of it. I just press the buttons in the right order. But that's a really good point. Thank you. Any other questions? Or Graham?
It's just a comment that Jonathan Frank says yes.
Sorry, who said yes?
Jonathan Frank.
Oh, Jonathan Frank says yes. Jonathan, thank you. What is it? Okay. The question was asked on live stream. I will chat to you individually about that. It's a great question, but I probably need to think about that before I answer it. Now, you're wondering what the question is. You'll have to look at the live stream comments to find out what the question is. But thank you for that question. We'll have a conversation about that individually and see where we get to. Thank you for mentioning it, Adam. Any more questions? Because this is your opportunity. This doesn't happen very often, unless you badger me at the door. Roland first, and I'll come back to you, Margaret.
It's maybe a side issue in some respects, but I was perhaps a little surprised by the mission giving being so low. Okay. We have, 4 mission partners. £6,750 doesn't go very far for those organisations from a church that has so much.
Mm-hmm. That's partly because in the last few years, our mission giving has been focused around our harvest giving appeal, which is focused on a mission partner. So therefore, it's a direct response to people's willingness to give on that particular day. Now, I know when I first arrived, there was a policy here to give 10% of the income away to mission. The reason that came to an end was because we needed to pay for the building. Now, I have to say, I'm not in favour of reintroducing that for various reasons, but I do think we need to be effectively supporting mission, not just financially, but prayerfully and practically, which is why when I first arrived, and those of you who know this, I really worked out we had links with about 20 different mission agencies. And I once had a quiz on the PCC, how many of those can you name? And most people got to 6. And that became apparent. There are lots of very, very important mission agencies to support, but we can't support them all. So the 4 we are supporting, we want to support really well. But it is something we need to be aware of, and certainly when it comes to our mission giving, Partners Giving Day in September, that's something we want to reflect upon. But thank you for raising it. Margaret, you wanted to say something.
Mike, on a Sunday morning, it seems to be the pattern now that there's quite a bit of chattering that's encouraged between us, getting to know each other, etc. Some people are uncomfortable with it. They prefer to sit quietly and prepare for the service. Mm-hmm. It's just I'm just passing on, and myself included. Okay.
Thank you for. There are some things you can't do, but you can't do both at the same time. You can't have discussion and quietness at the same time. That's impossible to do. I think the main Sunday service, you can tell I'm an evangelist by background because I'm always looking out for the newcomers. But we do want to provide opportunities if people prefer a quietness. So the 8 o'clock service and also the 11 o'clock Wednesday service are particular times, as you know, those who've come along to it. And if you haven't come to 11 o'clock service, do come and join us. It's a tremendous time of fellowship and lunch and an opportunity. So I am conscious, but sometimes you simply can't do everything at the same time. People who particularly want quiet, I know that even a few people talking can disturb that. And that's why other services are potentially probably better for them. But I do take that on board, and we are all trying to learn as we go along how best to provide a meaningful worship environment, not just for members of the church family, but also for those who are coming here for the first time, because the atmosphere and the welcome people receive, and many people have said they've been so encouraged by seeing all ages here. from the oldest to the youngest, and that's a great encouragement. But thank you, that's really helpful. We'll certainly bear that in mind as we think about the future. Any other questions? Oh, Alison.
So I've just got a bit of a question around our Sunday worship.
Yeah.
In the sense that we've got a pattern at the moment where it's like Paul's team one week, the youth band another week, and organ-led worship. And part of us all being one big family of age groups, different age groups, which I think is really, really important. I just feel it would be really nice if there was a way of blending our Sunday worships more so that there is more of a mix each week rather than such distinct.
Sure.
Is that something that we can
No,
work towards?
it's a helpful comment. I will say this. One of the things that never surprises me is how much of people's opinions of Sunday worship comes down to music. Personally, I'd love to be in a situation when people don't know what's going to happen. They just know it's going to be good. But we have had these discussions. There are practical pros and cons for one worship band or organ, worship band and organ together. And sometimes it's a pragmatic concern and an availability concern. But it is something that is a focus for discussion. And as we move into becoming more, the 10:15 together service is more, it's now just what we do. How we make it as meaningful as possible for the whole church family is something we will be discussing. And as you're now on the PCC, you'll be able to contribute to that. But it is something the wardens, we've discussed this, and in one sense, whatever you do, it won't suit everyone. And that's the difficulty. So how do you get the right? And there is no right answer. Perhaps the real thing is to encourage people to use whatever is there to worship God. Because if we come with that attitude to worship, as long as it's done well, and I know when you hear the band and the youth band playing really well, when you hear the organ, when it's played well, it is fantastic. That's another reason to come for the Wednesday 11 o'clock service, because it is played wonderfully. When it's played well, to honour God, it can be a real encouragement and a real blessing. But it's very important to think about those who are new here and how we can help them. So that's a long answer to you're right, and it's something we are going to continue to think about in the coming weeks and months as we develop what we're offering and what we do here on a Sunday. But thank you for the question. Roland, you can have another one.
It was a comment partly on that. That the church that my eldest daughter goes to had the challenge of music, organ or contemporary, and it was in the wonderful position where those who loved the organ lobbied the vicar for contemporary music because on behalf of the youth, and the youth lobbied for the organ on behalf of those who love contemporary. Really? I would love that to be the same here. That's real Christian service, I think.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Can I just say, actually, as we're thinking about that, I've been so blessed by the music provision we've had, and I think partly it's by giving the musicians the freedom to use their gifts and abilities. So I think that the organ, I sometimes joke that Steve or Adrian, you can't see them, they're sort of sat down in a sort of on a low bench, but they're brilliant and they're so willing to be involved. We're talking about modern hymns that they can play. But I also think the band and the youth band, that I think Paul, I'm amazed you're still sane, Paul, because I know the youth band are a challenge, but most people, let's be honest, when people hear youth band, they think it's going to be thrashing everything in sight, playing music as loud as possible. They have been a wonderful blessing to us as a church family. And I think for Paul and the others, thank you for doing that. But I'm not a musician, but all people who've got musical abilities and gifts, it's wonderful that they can use them in service of the church. And getting the blend right is really important. But yes, if you want to lobby in the way that Roland mentioned there, please do. I'm happy to receive that sort of lobbying. That's great. One more question as it's 9:05. Judith.
Hi, just a quick question, and sorry, Frank, if I missed it. In terms of paying for the building, have we paid all our debts now from the building, or have we still got, I don't want all the details, but
sure,
you know, like, have we basically cleared all that now?
For
Because I know for Mission that was one of the reasons that had to stop.
For the building that actually has been done, yes, that's all been paid for. That's all been paid for, yeah. The church and Link. And the kitchen bit, absolutely. So yeah, that's the answer to the question. It has been, but obviously there's the next bit that we need to think about, and that's something we need. But the whole question of mission giving, that is something for the PCC to make a decision on. And although I may not be in favour of it personally, if the PCC decide they want to go back to a different form, then that's a PCC decision. So again, lobby your PCC members, and it will be something we'll reflect on, probably not in the next few months, but certainly when we get a greater understanding of the other financial commitments and how that works together. But thank you for asking that. Now, we've come to the end of our time. Adam, thank you very much. In a moment, Adam's going to pray for us, but I think it's important, with all that we've discussed, we finish by worshipping God together. So we're going to have a song. We don't use the videos very often now, but this is a song we've sung a few times. It's We Declare by Emu Music, and it's a great way to finish our time together. So if you're able to, would you please stand? And we're going to sing together, We Declare. Thanks. Would you please be seated? And Adam's going to close our meeting in prayer.
But before I do that, a little unofficial any other business. It's not technically any other business, but I want to say thank you on all of our behalves to Mike, who has put in so much work into all of this and gainfully answered all our questions, no matter how tough they are. Let's give a round of applause to Mike. It is generally bad form for a curate to embarrass his vicar, but on this occasion, I think it's allowed. Let's pray together. Loving God, we thank you that we can gather here today to make decisions for your church and for your people here in Ilkley. We thank you for the decisions that we've made, for the people that we've appointed as wardens, PCC members, treasurers, independent examiners and other things. We thank you for them and for their ministry here, and we ask that you bless them in their new roles, bless them as they move forward into a new era of service for your church. We thank you for all the work that goes on here in this church and all the different ministries, and we pray that you bless that as well for this coming year. And Lord, we ask for your blessing upon the decisions we've made, that they will be good ones, that they will be the right ones, and that they would usher in a new and better year for this church, better even than the one that has come before. So in all of these, we offer this meeting up to you with our love and gratitude to your praise and glory. Amen.
Adam, thank you. Let's finish by saying the words of the grace to each other together. May the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ and the love of God and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us all evermore. Amen. Thank you to those of us who joined us on live stream. Again, come and join us on Sunday, and we hope it's been meaningful for you. Thank you to everyone who's come here. If you've got any cups, please take them back to the kitchen. Apart from that, I'll see you on Sunday. God bless you.